Welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where in every episode we explore what is research culture and what should it be. You'll hear thoughts and opinions from a range of contributors to help you change research culture into what you want it to be.
Hi, this is Ged Hall, and for those who don't know me, I'm an academic development consultant at the University of Leeds, and you're joining us in Season 5 of our Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where we're diving into the effects of research impact on research culture and focusing in on different topics to ensure those effects are positive. Today, I'm delighted to be talking to Professor Mark Birkin and Dr. Emily Ennis. Mark is the director of Leeds Institute for Data Analytics, or LIDA, and the Consumer Data Research Centre, or CDRC. And Emily is CDRC's Research and Impact Manager. The reason for asking Emily and Mark to join us today is because of the success of LIDA and CDRC in two sets of awards that the University of Leeds ran in the summer of 2022. One set of awards focused on improving our research culture, and LIDA nominations were winners in 2 of the 5 categories. The other awards focused on research impact. In this set of awards, LIDA and CDRC won 3 of the 5 categories and were runner-up in the 4th. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about how the successes were delivered. But before we dive into our discussions, our listeners always like to get to know our interviewees a little bit more. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your obsessions or interests outside of work and who or what got you into that. So Emily, I'll come to you first.
Oh, thanks, Jed. I had a bit of a puzzle on this one, trying to think about how best to seem interesting as beyond my work persona. But I guess the one thing that I keep coming back to in terms of something that has preoccupied my mind for, I guess, the longest period of time that hasn't just been, study or work, has actually been learning French. So I started learning French as a kid, about 5 or 6 when I started learning, went all the way through to A-level, and then just kind of chickened out when I came to university and didn't actually do it as a kind of joint honours degree. So just before the start of the pandemic, I started going back to French classes, and I'm now kind of working, I guess, towards fluency, which is quite nice and quite exotic. And when I went to Paris earlier this year, I did manage to actually have people speak French back to me when I use my own French. So in terms of kind of what got me into it, it's just been a fascination of mine that anyone can speak, more than one language. And my degrees and my PhD were in English literature, and I always felt like having an understanding of another language was actually really beneficial for understanding the mechanics of the language that I already spoke and already used. So it did prove to be quite useful. But yeah, that's I guess a thing that I actually dedicate the most time to beyond work is kind of reading French, watching French films, having French classes, things like that. So yeah, that I think that makes me sound interesting.
It makes you sound interesting and really clever, especially in comparison to my obsession with pies that I talked about when I was interviewed. So, yeah, Mark, could you give us your obsession outside of work?
Yeah, well, I never thought about the challenge of trying to make myself sound interesting. I did the thing that I immediately thought about. So I spent several years, at least 6, as the county captain of the Yorkshire chess team. And one of my main claim to fame in that capacity is that for the first time ever, we won 3 successive national titles. So I was quite pleased with that. And I think actually in the context of this conversation, I mean, chess is quite interesting. It's obviously a very individual kind of sport or pastime. It requires a high level of dedication, and expertise and training and all of that. But actually, it's quite interesting when the reason why that team was successful, I think, is because they had a real spirit. That they wanted to win, and everybody played for each other. There's a slight danger that people are worried about, their own kind of individual record that they've never lost or whatever. And I'm sorry, but I can't resist saying we understand your obsession with pies, and I think I get a bit of a northwest twang there. But Lancashire and Yorkshire were the big rivals, so we always used to, because it starts off regional, so Yorkshire and Lancashire always had to get past one another before they could then start worrying about dealing with the southern softies. And I would never got beaten by Lancashire in either an individual or a team match, and I'm very, very pleased with that. I think I had the best record going against Lancashire. So you can cut that one out, but I couldn't resist pulling your leg while we're here.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm a diehard Lancastrian, so you have to let Yorkshiremen think they're the best. Anyway, moving on, and thank you for that. You've actually made me feel really a bit dim in comparison, so I might have to try and find some more intellectual obsessions to engage with in the future. So now we're moving into the kind of interview proper. I wonder if, Mark, you can give us a sense of what LIDA and CDRC are and how they interact, and then for both of you, really, how your roles within them kind of flesh out. So, Mark, can you give us that overview first?
Yeah. So, CDRC, the Consumer Data Research Centre, we kind of opened our doors in 2014. So that means that we started thinking about a year before that. It was part of the Economic and Social Research Council. They had a big data program at the time. So for listeners who've not encountered big data, I guess many will have, but it's the idea that society, the world around us, is starting to generate enormous volumes of data about everything. Think about anything from medical devices to satellite imagery to customer loyalty cards to smart energy meters. We all generate kind of data through our activities. I mean, social media is another one all the time, and that kind of information is really interesting to social scientists. And in a lot of ways, it's far more interesting and far more powerful than things like census data or government surveys that academics typically base their research around. But one of the big issues is, so there's lots of this stuff. It's really interesting, but how do I, as an academic, get access to that kind of information? Because I can't just go and knock on the door of my local Tesco and ask if they'd like to share all their club card, because we think the amount of meat people are consuming is really important for their health, or these kinds of questions. So the Consumer Data Research Centre was established to kind of try and create a bridge between the academic world and this externally facing combination of commercial and government organisations and media businesses and all this kind of thing. With the idea of so what did we need to do to actually persuade these people to find a way of working more closely together around these really interesting challenges and questions? So CDRC was established in 2014 to do that. And I think it's been a real success story. Thanks in part to just the quality of the people that we have, the teams that we've been able to build, both in the academic kind of part of that and on the management side. So we're still going strong 8 years later. We're making a lot of progress, but there's still so much more to do, because there's masses of interesting work that we could be doing by engaging with more social scientists and by working more effectively and collaboratively with other organisations. But it's a big challenge. We made lots of progress. It's very, very exciting. Just briefly on the LIDA side of things, then. So the way that LIDA came about, I mean, coincidentally, within about 4 weeks of the CDRC being commissioned and the project being approved by ESRC, this university was also awarded a very large project in medical bioinformatics. These were both £6-7 million projects, very, very big by the standards of the run-of-the-mill kind of research projects. And I actually bumped into Alex Markham, Professor Sir Alex Markham, who was the leader of the MRC Bioinformatics Centre. We met each other for the first time, and it was at the celebration party for the submission of the 2014 Research Excellence Framework, the ref return from the from the university. And we got on very well. We both knew what was happening in our areas, and we kind of just thought it would be a really good idea to try and bring these two things together. Yeah, and both of them fairly wide ranging, actually, in terms of touching computer science and mathematics and informatics, as well as medicine and business and the environment and all these kind of questions. Can we do something that would really, combine our efforts and push some capability and interest right through the university in a tremendously important strategic area? Because Alan Langland's actually, by coincidence, had also chaired a couple of national panels on secondary data use and those kind of questions. So it was just quite a nice alignment, really, that led to the whole development and taking LIDA forward.
That's great. It's lovely to see research assessment having a positive impact. Research assessment or research excellence framework in the UK that Mark mentioned there. So Emily, I'll come to you. Tell us about your role in CDRC and how will you get up to?
Yeah, so as Mark said, CDRC has been around since 2014. I'm a much newer addition to the centre. So by my understanding, the kind of first phase of CDRC involved kind of heavy investment of resource into establishing the data store that we have. So that is kind of making those data that Mark was talking about available to researchers for the first time ever, really, those consumer data. So that was kind of a real heavy investment at the start of the CDRC. But then we kind of moved into phase 2, and that kind of started just before I joined in November 2020, where we really started to kind of, I guess, reflect on the impact that we knew CDRC was already having and that it was developing, and also to provide kind of additional resource to CDRC researchers through kind of my support. So as with LIDA, CDRC is a group of kind of interdisciplinary academics. They are typically kind of like parented or housed in the faculties of medicine, faculty of environment, and the Leeds Business School. So their day jobs, their 4 out of 5 days might be within a school or faculty, and then kind of however many days attached to CDRC. So it was really important, I think, from my understanding of why my role was created, to make sure that someone was kind of keeping tabs on the research that was kind of specific to CDRC and the impact that was specific to CDRC, but also making sure that there was this resource within CDRC as a kind of place where interdisciplinary research was happening, so that could kind of be, I guess, I don't want to say measured, because I think that's kind of too reffy, but that there was a resource within the CDRC to help those academics realise their impact. And so I guess in terms of what my day-to-day job looks like, so obviously from an impact perspective, I collect evidence of impact, I kind of pursue lines of impact, I kind of make suggestions about how research could be impactful. But also from a kind of research management perspective, my job looks like kind of helping with funding bids, maybe identifying things like follow-on funding or impact acceleration funding that could be applied for. I do sometimes take kind of a leading role in some research projects. So a research project that we kind of worked collaboratively on with Leeds City Council recently, which was one of the award winners at the Engage for Impact Awards that you talked about, Ged. That was on looking at the carbon footprint of food that Leeds City Council procured. So part of my kind of role in that was actually seeing the opportunity for researchers in CDRC to work with Leeds City Council, putting them in touch with each other, and then actually kind of, I guess, managing that research project, and also line managing the data scientist that was on that project. So that's a kind of, I guess, more research leader, research management kind of perspective. And I also help with things like government consultations, scoping meetings, putting people in touch with each other, and project management. So it's not just about the impact, it's also about that kind of additional, again, resource and infrastructure for researchers in the CDRC.
Thanks, that's brilliant. I mean, it's lovely to hear you being there to really help and actually drive some things, because I do sometimes wonder whether there's just too much advice and not enough direct help offered to academics. So it's great to see you in that space. So obviously, impact and research culture must be high priority for LIDA and CDRC, judging by the number of nominations and actually the success of those nominations in the 2 awards in the summer. So what? Just kind of picking in on that, what elements of research culture have emerged as priorities for you to work on within LIDA and CDRC? And I suppose, how do you decide on those collectively with all the people involved? Emily, I'll come to you on that one first.
I suspected you might come to me first, because I had a thinking face on. I mean, it's really interesting actually how I think CDRC works as a group of individuals. So I think that both the researchers and the operational team within CDRC tend to be fairly autonomous. So where there have been opportunities to drive forward different elements of research culture, that's kind of been taken forward by individuals. So our senior ops coordinator, Kylie Norman, she leads quite strongly on our EDI kind of strand of research culture, I guess, looking quite a lot at positive action recruitment and things like decolonizing data science as well. So that has kind of appeared as a strand of our research culture that has been led by one individual. I think there's also a kind of new and emerging strand to our research culture, which is about the ability to respond in an agile way to actual kind of really pressing societal concerns. So I joined this role in November 2020, and at that point we had quite a lot of initiatives around COVID-19, mobilizing data rapidly in order to kind of solve problems, working with local authorities to help them get the answers from data that they wouldn't necessarily have the resource to get answers from. So another kind of strand of our research culture has been focusing on, what can we solve and quickly. And so that has kind of meant that, I guess, in terms of how we work as an organization, as a center, it means developing a research culture where we're able to work in quite agile ways and quite responsive ways. And I think one of the ways we're able to do that is the CDRC has a team of research data scientists, as well as access to some data scientists on the LIDA Data Scientist Development Programme. So these are, on the Data Scientist Development Programme, these are kind of recent graduates or career changers who are doing 2 6-month projects focused on solving real world problems, usually with external partners. And then our research data scientist team are kind of available to work across different projects, bring kind of real technical expertise to the research that we do. And having access to these kind of 2, I guess, branches of data scientists is what allows us to go, okay, we really need to respond to this really quickly. Let's put the data scientist on it for 6 months, or let's put our research data scientist on it for a couple of months and kind of move work around. So it's made us a bit more responsive by having that additional resource beyond typical kind of academic time. And I think that the way that we're able to do that beyond the resource as well is that, as a centre, we are quite effective at making it clear what's a priority. So we have weekly meetings, we have quarterly meetings. There is a research management process that I help to facilitate. And we also have a partnerships development manager. So we have kind of a lot of resource in terms of identifying, okay, we need to seize on this opportunity. Who in our team can do it? Okay, that's great. But then also, when are we going to check in on this? How are we going to measure the success? There's lots of opportunities to do that. I guess those are not necessarily the priorities, but those are the things that have ended up really kind of typifying, I think, how CDRC can work.
Lovely. Mark, can I get your view on that as well?
Yeah, I think, one of the big things that immediately struck me about this is, I don't think we tend to think of it at all as a design and build kind of process. And, I was thinking kind of the key thing is thinking about the way that the management of the CDRC works. I mean, it's interesting because we have there's like a sister institute which is run out of UCL, and they have this senior management team, and from time to time we get these kind of formal communications about, the senior management team would like to enter into a negotiation about this year's user meeting or something. So the way that we largely operate within CDRC is that we have a roundtable meeting every Wednesday, and so as long as we can make it, kind of the co-directors are there, and most of the seniors. But I think I'm sure we would agree it's not everybody in the group, because it's a very large centre. But there are a large number of people, maybe 15 people around the table, a combination of academics and the key kind of managers, research managers and things. We just talk things through, what we've been doing, what's come up, what the opportunities are, what we need to do. And I think it's just a fairly open process. It's a great way to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. And I think as long as people kind of that gives them a clear picture, I think, of what's going on everywhere. We all have a good understanding, I hope, of what the ambitions of what our ambitions are as a group. So who's doing what we need to be doing. And so it's not like we sit down and think, oh crumbs, how can we what steps do we need to take to establish a really excellent culture here? I think I'm not saying this is the only way that you do it, but I think it would be our experience that it's that it's kind of grown organically. So I mean that was one thought. Maybe I could say two other things. I wrote down this is where I wrote down 10 things, and I thought, well, I'm in danger of writing one of these self-help manuals that that I always want to burn when I see them in train stations and that kind of thing. I don't really want that, but that's what I did. So Emily mentioned the data science development program that was on my list as well. But one of the things about the data science development program is that it's been coordinated for about the last 5 years by someone who is absolutely fantastic. And if I were to take, certainly when we recruited her, she would not have been on the top half of the kind of the pay scales, of the management structure in terms of seniority. But she totally made this data science development program her own. So she really takes ownership for it, looks after the young data scientists who are on that program, has the relationships with people who are actually sponsoring the projects, and the supervisors, the academics, and all that kind of thing, and just done an absolutely fantastic job. And one of my this sounds like a terrible cliche. Maybe this should be the title of my book, actually. But I think everyone's a leader in a team that functions well. And you don't have to look to me or to Ed Manley or to Nick Lomax, or even if you want to do impact, then Emily Ennis will help you out. But we don't have to put Emily in charge of a project that's delivering impact. And and again, it sounds like a bit of a cliche. I've been asking myself a couple of kind of job interviews, but about sort of leadership and management. It's not about managing people. It really is about I think trying to empower them as leaders, and to take kind of control and responsibility and pride and everything in the work that they do. But then again, just going back to where I started, that fact that you can all sit round a table together, whether you're having Christmas dinner or a weekly meeting or what have you, and everybody's success in that group means something to everybody. And we kind of feel that automatically, I think, leads on to an element of feeling other people's pain if they're struggling or whatever. But again, if you get that right, then people will actually they want to help one another out to get over those kind of bumps in the road and things as well. I mentioned to you in early correspondence. I think it's quite a bottom up kind of process.
Well, it's certainly successful. So I wanted to, in the next question, kind of like make you feel slightly uncomfortable in terms of, I'm going to ask you to, in terms of specifically, what your input into that success is. How are you enabling that kind of almost bottom up? How are you allowing that to happen? How are you cultivating it? So, Mark, I'll come to you first, as people would normally expect culture to be driven top down.
I think it helps if you're kind of successful and good at what you do. And I'm always, and I did in my notes. I mean, there's always going to be a footballing analogy in there somewhere, and or a sporting analogy. I'm not actually quite sure where this one leads you. I mean, I thought about kind of a captain of a football team, and that is an interesting one because, I think a captain of a football team, quite often is the best player, or certainly someone whose name is close to being first on the team sheet, kind of thing. I mean, but has other kind of qualities as well. And then you get into all sorts of issues about, Bobby Moore was the captain of the 1966 team kind of thing, and he didn't score all the goals because he was centre half and all of that. So, there is an element of, that you need to be able to recognise and combine different, skills and expertise. And that, that's really important because, for example, Emily knows far more about impact and how you achieve it than I ever would. But on the other hand, I wouldn't regard myself as being completely ignorant, and I'd like to think that, again, if we go back to those kind of bumps in the road or what have you, and Emily had a challenge that she needed a bit of help with or advice on, that she'd be able to talk to me kind of intelligently about that. I'm wondering where this spiel is actually taking me at the end of the day. So I think so that kind of leadership by example I've always regarded as something that's really important. Again, perhaps in a leader rather than a manager. I think sometimes people in a managerial mindset tend to think, oh, I've got all these things to do. How can I kind of pass them out and deliver them? And I honestly think that I'd like to think that my mindset is, okay, all these things need to be done. What can I contribute to that? And how can I find the best people to kind of help me and to build it together, kind of thing. Having a good strategy is important, but again, I think it's one of those things where you don't necessarily sit down and design it, or you can't, and you can't kind of do it by numbers. It doesn't matter how long you sit people in a room and try to think about what it might be. I think we're quite fortunate in the sense that, well, I hope you and the listeners will have got it, but I feel that I can describe what CDRC in particular is trying to do in a couple of minutes, and people will understand it. And so, if you can be clear about kind of what your strategy is, and I guess what your values are, but again, that I think people just get that by the fact of, do you have cups of coffee together? Occasionally go out for meals or this, that, and the other. That it will kind of come through. So I'll pause for breath there, and maybe Emily can have a go.
Absolutely, Emily. So, what's your contribution? Let's be reffy about it.
Well, I think what Mark has said has actually been a really useful thing for me to reflect on, because I was also thinking, so one of the things that I really value about my role, and that was also quite a bit of a culture shift moving from similar roles elsewhere in the university to the CDRC, is that there's a real recognition of expertise in the CDRC. So, I am recognised as an impact professional. The partnerships development manager is recognised as someone who can foster, build and develop partnerships. And, we've got senior ops coordinator, that's her area of expertise. And maybe that's because there's only one of us in each of these roles. And so we really do have to kind of embody that role and represent that kind of work to the CDRC. But I also think, as Mark has kind of said, we're also kind of empowered to do those things by, the recognition that we receive for the work that we do, but also from, the fact that our kind of weekly discussions are round table, kind of fairly equitable kind of discussion. My work is just as important as a co-investigator's work or a co-director's work. That is, it's entirely level playing field. And, like I say, part of that is recognition of expertise, but also part of that is, empowerment and allowing us to lead on things and say, oh, I think this is a priority. I think this is something that we should do. We're going to do it. And those things tend to be successful because you get buy-in by virtue of being kind of excited about something and feeling like it's something that you can take forward and lead. So, I think when I was thinking about, why do I feel like I'm successful in the work that I do? And part of me was thinking, well, it is beneficial that I have a PhD. It is beneficial that I've been a researcher and that I know how this works. But I also think what is really important about my role is that everyone buys into what I do. And the reason why they do that is because there's a culture of recognition that I'm the person to do that I am the impact person. And as Mark said, I'm not the only person responsible. If, people are perfectly capable of leading their own impact projects, but, I am recognized as delivering that bit of expertise, just as everyone else in the centre has their own area of expertise. So I think that is my contribution. I have kind of, I think, helped CDRC realise its impact, or at least reflect on it. But I don't think I would have been able to do that without the culture that already existed here, or that was growing here before I got here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to ask you a really unfair question and actually get you to rate Mark on an impact scale, but I won't. I won't do that.
Jed, can I have
sure.
a couple of wild cards then, and maybe you can decide later whether you want to include these.
Sure, go ahead.
But a couple. So from my as yet unwritten coffee table book, but quickly taking shape in my mind. And the first one is, I've always worked reasonably hard, but I also try to have fun at work. And I was just reflecting back and thinking what I was saying earlier about team building and things. And so when I was a much less experienced person than I am now, we used to take people on these sort of team building weekends. So I used to run a university company, and we used to do that kind of thing. And I remember one time we were in the Peak District, and we were doing an exercise, one of these things where you have to put rafts together out of barrels and ropes and all that kind of stuff. And there were a couple of teams, and my team, I thought we done really well, and we managed to get across the lake to the middle and all that. And anyway, at the end of the afternoon, it somehow turned out that just one member of our team ended up on a collapsing raft that the others had somehow engineered. And what I didn't say is that I also had a reputation for being slightly too enthusiastic on occasion on these things. But I've always remembered, and I've always taken great satisfaction in the fact that the members of my team felt able to dip me in the water as a gentle means of pointing out to me that perhaps I get a bit too excited sometimes when the heat is on. And the other one, I think, I couch it as be lucky, but perhaps I recognise that the importance of good fortune from time to time. One of the things that really irritates me, if you're asking Alan Sugar these questions, or someone like that, I suppose they'd be diplomatic. They're probably telling you about how hard they worked, and harder than everybody else, and they started younger and they were clever and this, that, and the other. And sometimes the truth is that the people who are very successful were just a bit luckier at the important time than thousands of other people who might equally with the right opportunity at the right moment have been there. And again, I just come back to those. Again, if you're thinking about successes within your organisation, sometimes we're successful because we did great things, and obviously if you do good things then it helps. But sometimes you're unsuccessful because it's just not your turn. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything wrong. And I think taking a rounded view of all these kind of questions is helpful for you.
I'm just interested in terms of where you go next with the kind of topics around research culture and impact. So any thoughts on future plans in terms of how you develop on the success you've had already, Emily?
I mean, I can jump in. I mean, so I guess the immediate aftermath, that makes it sound like a negative thing, but having won these research culture awards and also Engage for Impact awards, we received a little kind of financial boost, a little kind of prize money pot, that obviously helps give us resource for something immediately, to within the next kind of year to think about what we do. And so, one of the Research Culture Awards we won was for openness, open research and impact, essentially. And so we wanted to think about, the CDRC was set up to make these data accessible. So to suddenly, like Mark said, you can't just walk into Tesco and ask for it. We're a platform and we're facilitating new research. And we thought, well, how do we want to continue to do that? And then also in the back of our minds, acknowledging that through our data scientist development program, we've done things like positive action recruitment, and that we're continuing to do positive action recruitment. So, recruiting more BAME data scientists and also women data scientists. So that's also about making data open and accessible. So with the money that we received for that Research Culture Award, we actually created an open data science bursary, which allows people with protected characteristics and people from low-income households to do the short courses that the CDRC runs in data science, different kind of data science skills, and to do that with the help of the bursary, with the kind of aim of making data science more equitable. We know as a research centre that both data and data scientists have a bias, and one of the ways to kind of limit that bias is to have a more representative data science workforce, but also more representative data science. And you can only get more representative data science with more representative data scientists. So we're that's been a step forward for us, both in terms of thinking about how we use our platform as making consumer data more accessible, but also, to kind of target some of our, I guess, EDI objectives as well. So that's a kind of immediate step that we've taken. We've also, with this success, kind of given ourselves an opportunity and a chance to reflect on where we are and what we want to be. So we're also currently working through a vision statement exercise. So we've got working groups for different kind of vision statement topics within the CDRC. So data ethics, data governance, partnership working, values, things like that will kind of give us opportunity to reflect on what we already do well, and also what our kind of aspirations are for kind of forward thinking and future research. And I guess the thing to bear in mind in all of this is that because the CDRC is funded by the ESRC, we're only funded up until a certain point in time, and we're having to kind of make plans and strategies and kind of to anticipate things like impact beyond the known kind of frontier. So we're having to kind of it's not always blue sky thinking. I think we're really confident in what we do and the value of what we do, but we also have to kind of think about that at the moment we're funded up until 2024, and what can we do in that time to really make an impact. So one thing that we are doing from a practical perspective is kind of focusing a lot more, from my mind, on kind of impact with policymakers, and I think we've done quite a lot of that in the last year, but also developing a lot of data products from our data. And one of the things that's good about that is that it continues to exist online. It's not a moment in time necessarily. It is something that continues to grow new research and to develop new research. So I can't imagine a situation in which the CDRC doesn't continue, but equally if it didn't, there's our legacy there for us already in those data products and those tools that people can use to do new research. And equally, the data that we have on the data store can be used to do new research. So our legacy and our sustainability certainly goes beyond whatever fixed point in time might be the funding cutoff.
Yeah. Mark, anything you wanted to add to that in terms of where you hope LIDA and CDRC go with research culture and research impact?
Well, I don't know about rating me. I think Emmy should be doing my job, because I'm sure I could. I've done a lot to to what you just said, which is great. I mean, I suppose, one thing I think it is really important, if you can, to continue on that path of sort of success and growth. And I mean, as Amy said, you've got to be realistic. We don't have, kind of long-term guaranteed funding for our future. But on the other hand, I think we are quite fortunate in the sense that we're working in a very dynamic area, and everything I said and could have said more about kind of data science and AI and all those sorts of things. But I do believe, I think that we believe that we have an important specific mission, and it is part of a much bigger kind of social and kind of national agenda. So and it is important to continue to be ambitious, and again, if you can, to continue kind of prosper and grow. And again, partly because that that just allows everybody to grow as a group, and to create new opportunities for people to move into and all that sort of thing. And I tell you, we've been quite lucky in that regard, and hopefully we'll continue to be in terms of the funding that we can receive and our ambition. And I think maybe the hard challenge comes if it starts to slow down. You need to try to create that thinking without necessarily doubling in size every couple of years, kind of thing. So I think, but then again, everything else that Emily said, I mean, I just think for me is an endorsement of a lot of things that we talked about. Because to be frank, there's some things in there that either I don't know, or I don't really understand how they came about. They just happened while I was kind of partly paying attention. And but the other thing I think is that that I think we're quite fortunate is that our sort of agenda, it is something that you can really get enthusiastic about. We need to try to engage the public in the kind of conversations that we are having, because that's the only way that you can take forward these kind of conversations. Are you happy for your club card data to be used for people to other people to understand how they might be at risk of heart disease or something? The impact agenda is really important to us, because we can't do what we do without engaging with those sort of third-party organisations. And again, as Emily said, there's a really strong imperative or incentive for us to be doing the right sorts of things, if I could put it so crudely, in relation to kind of widening participation and a more balanced approach to who's involved in data and data science. So it's both from that point of view of kind of the growth agenda, but the hearts and minds kind of thing. It's a really great area to be working in. And
Emily, Mark, thank you for joining us today and lifting the lid on how LIDA and CDRC formulate their research culture and deliver their research impact from what sounds like a really family basis, almost, in terms of a cultural perspective, if I can put it that way. So thank you much for sharing your thoughts today.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, I'd just like to say thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about things that we do every day and that we're really interested in. But really, really nice to have the chance to share that with yourself, Ged, and with the listeners. And I hope they find something of interest or entertainment in there.
That's great. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Ged.
Thanks for listening to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss out on our brand new episodes. And if you're enjoying the discussions, give us some love by dropping a 5-star rating and written review, as it helps other research culturists find us. And please share with a friend and show them how to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and here's to you and your research culture.